We've got breaking news out of college football where Alabama safety Caleb Downs is entering the transfer portal. That is according to 24/7 Sports. Downs was the #1 safety in the country last year coming out of high school. He recorded 107 tackles his freshman year and was named a freshman All-American. 24/7 Sports' John Talty reports that Georgia is currently the team to beat for Downs. So let's welcome in senior staff writer for Bama 247, John Talty. John, before we get into all of it, give us your initial reaction. What are you thinking when you're hearing that Caleb Downs is entering the transfer portal? Surprised or not so much?
Well, this has been in the works the last couple of days. I think that when Nick Saban especially decided to retire, Caleb Downs came to Alabama to learn under Nick Saban. Nick Saban, a defensive backs master, worked very closely with Downs. So I think when Nick Saban left, really opened, a lot of questions for Caleb and his family. I think they were very curious to see who was going to be the defensive coordinator and who was going to be his position coach. Now that those hires have been made for Alabama, I think it made Caleb's decision kind of clear that it was time to look elsewhere. But, big picture wise, this is a massive blow for Alabama to lose Caleb Downs, a terrific player. People think he could be one of the real greats of Alabama defensive players. And there's been a lot of good ones that came through under Nick Saban, but a Minka Fitzpatrick type player has that kind of capabilities. And so this is the guy that you hope as a new coach like Kalen DeBoer that you can build a foundation around. So to see him enter the transfer portal and, again, according to our reporting, Georgia the favorite to land him, to not only potentially lose him, but to see him go to what's going to be your top competition in the SEC is a tough blow when you've only been on the job less than a week.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of that because if you're a Bama fan and then you see Georgia take away one of your top guys, I mean, that's got to be a huge blow, especially for the Crimson Tide fans. What's your take on that?
Yeah, if he ultimately goes to Georgia, and again, we're reporting they're the clear favorite right now, and in part, one of the reasons why they are the clear favorite is that they recently hired Travaris Robinson, known as T-Rob. Downs has a very close relationship with T-Rob. He was, at Alabama last year. He went to Georgia. Alabama tried to get him to come back as defensive coordinator, and he ultimately decided to stay at Georgia. And so Caleb, from what I've been told by good sources, is very interested in, working with Kirby Smart, working with T-Rob, working with Dante Williams, who was recently hired as Georgia's cornerbacks coach. That's why they're the early front runner at this point. But that's a huge loss, for Alabama. Again, this is I think what life is now going to be like, for Kalen DeBoer and this new Alabama staff. They come in very well regarded, did a great job guiding Washington to the national championship this game, but it's different in the SEC, especially when you have to go to head to head with people like Kirby Smart for recruits that you both want. And so, Kirby Smart was able to keep T-Rob, which I think ultimately is going to play a role if they get Caleb Downs in getting Caleb. And so it's kind of 2 early wins for Kirby Smart over Alabama's new head coach.
And you touched on it, John. Of course, roster retention, that's going to be key for Kalen DeBoer. He obviously has some huge shoes to fill there with Nick Saban. But can you kind of paint the picture for us what has happened since he got there just about a few days ago, not even a week, and maybe some other notable names that you're hearing that could be hitting the transfer portal soon?
Yeah, I mean, it's chaos right now. It really is, because you're not only trying to build a staff in real time, but you're trying to hold on to all these talented players. And it's something that we talked about the minute that Nick Saban retired, that the vultures were coming for Alabama. This is such a talented roster of so many, really good players that can make instant contributions elsewhere. And for lots of other schools, the portal is closed. But for Alabama and now Washington and Arizona, their players are on the open market potentially. And that is a very risky time to be a new head coach. And so I think he's doing everything he can to try to hold on to these players. I think, again, you've seen him put together his staff very quickly. A lot of it's been well regarded. I mean, it's interesting if you look back 12 or so hours ago, they took 2 sitting head coaches in Kane Womack and Mo Linguist to add to their defensive staff, and that was well lauded, and people were very excited about it. And then here we are now talking about Caleb Downs, in entering the transfer portal. So life comes at you fast in the SEC, and I think Kalen DeBoer is learning that. I think he's done a good job of trying to get guys to stay, but it's hard, and he's really got to try to stop the gap as much as possible from anybody else who can really make a contribution going into the transfer portal.
Yeah, it's all happened very, very quickly. Saban retires maybe 48 hours later, if that. They announced Kalen DeBoer is taking over. Now we're seeing guys hit the portal. Circling back to what Kalen DeBoer can do to retain some of these guys or replace. If you're the coach there in Bama, if you're Kalen DeBoer, what are you doing as you're seeing these guys hit in the portal? How are you replacing people like Caleb Downs? I mean, if you can.
Yeah, there's no replacing Caleb Downs. There's not a guy out there on the market who's going to replace him. I mean, this is, again, I think a potentially transcendent player, a guy who our Andrew Ivins, our director of scouting, said was essentially made in a lab for Nick Saban. Like, he was that perfect of a player for Alabama and what they like to do. And just the fact that he was their leading tackler as a true freshman, given all the other talent on the roster, I think is incredible. So I think that there's not a lot you can do other than trying to hold on as much as possible. Again, I think you can go shopping a little bit for some Washington transfers, some guys that you coached a year ago, maybe trying to bring them with you. Arizona has a pretty talented roster. Jed Fish, of course, going to Washington. Maybe you can get a guy or two from there. And then you're going to have to probably just wait until the spring to go shopping again. Now, typically the spring is not when the highest level players are going into the portal, but I think because of the late carousel we saw spurred on by Nick Saban's retirement, there might be a better quality player available in the spring. And so I think that's when you're going to have to try to go out there and add a couple more players, because you've lost some key contributors. I think especially on defense, just in the last week, losing Caleb Downs and losing Trey Amos, who looked on paper to be your #1 cornerback coming back. Those are massive losses. There's nobody on the roster to really replace those guys. You're going to have to probably go shopping in April to find somebody to replace them.
All right, John Talty joining us here on CBS Sports HQ as we were following that breaking news, Caleb Downs entering the transfer portal. Thank you so much, John. We appreciate it. And of course, John and the whole 24/7 Sports crew has got you covered. Wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting rankings, transfer portal updates. Speaking of some more updates, Zenitz from 24/7 Sports, Matt Zenitz reporting that Ohio State could potentially get a look at Caleb Downs if things don't work out with Georgia. So stay locked in here on CBS Sports HQ, and with our 24/7 Sports crew, we will keep you updated with all of the latest.